All right, so the third section of the stock market unit that we're going to look at is stock market data charts. We looked at how the newspapers may report the data. We also looked at how when it's online, I think we took a look at MSN's money page to see how it looks. But now we're going to look at some stock bar charts. So that's what's our learning target for today, is to interpret a stock bar chart as well as create a stock bar chart. And then the next part of this particular section deals with candlestick charts, and those we can actually create in Excel, and we'll do some of that next week. All right, so what does a stock bar chart look like? So here's a stock bar chart. You notice there's two pieces to it. There's this top piece that deals with some of the vocabulary we talked about in the first section. The daily high and the daily low are represented by the top and the bottom of the actual bar, and then the open and the close amounts are represented by these pieces out here to the left and right. And then down here at the bottom, this is the volume, or the number of shares that were traded on a particular day. Many times you'll see that this is just representative of one day. I can't tell if you can see this or not, but this is saying that it's for April 30th. But a lot of times what you'll see is multiple days along this, so you can kind of compare, 7 days at a time or 5 days at a time or whatever it may be. All right, so in this next grid, what we're going to do is actually fill in the prices or the dollar amounts, I guess I should say, for these things. So if we interpret this particular stock bar chart, we want to know, what did it open? What was the opening price for this particular stock for GE? All right, so the open amount is represented by this horizontal bar here. So if we go along the side where our units are, we've got 32.80 here and 32.90 there, and it looks like the opening price was right in between there. So we can say then that this particular stock opened at $32.85. So it opened at $32.85. For the close amount, we're going to do something very similar, except now this falls exactly on the line for 32.7. So that means that the stock closed at $32.70. All right, so it looks like over the course of this one day, April 30th, that this stock decreased by 15 cents. It opened at 32.85, closed at 32.70, so it dropped 15 cents from open to close. Now the highest that it got on that particular day, if you notice, is very close to $33.30. So we're going to estimate it's definitely higher than 33.25. So it's probably safe to say that it reached a high on that day of $33 and let's say 29 cents. And then we can do the same for the low. It's right down here at the bottom. So the low, I think you would agree, was $32.60. All right, so that's how we interpret the top part of it. Now we're going to look at the bottom half, and this is the volume, or the number of shares that were traded. And so very important when you create these or when you're interpreting them, that you determine or represent what this is being measured with out to the side. So this is in millions. So when this particular chart goes up just above 30, this is talking about 30 million shares, or really more than 30 million shares. All right, so for our volume, since it's just slightly over, we could probably say that there were 31 million shares traded on April 30th. Okay, so that's how we interpret a stock bar chart. So hopefully that all makes sense. Excuse me. You got these four things given to you at the top half, and then the volume itself is given to you in the bottom half. All right, let's look at a few examples. All right, so this is asking what day had the greatest high price and which day had the least low. So we want our highest high, put that there, and then we want the lowest low. So again, we're not concerned with the volume down here. That's not telling us anything in terms of the high and the low. So remember, the top of each rectangle represents the high, and the bottom of each of these rectangles represents the daily low. So what we want is, we want the day that has the rectangle highest up, and that looks like that occurred, if you come down here to the bottom, that occurred on May 2nd. All right, so hopefully that makes sense to you. This is May 2nd's high. This is May 1st's high, April 30th, April 29th, and April 28th. And May 2nd had the highest high, or the greatest high. Now, which day had the least low? Go ahead and take a second, think about that. All right, hopefully you said that it was April 29th, because that is the one that is the furthest down on the chart. So April 29th looks like it had a low of about $8 and maybe 7 or 8 cents. All right, so May 2nd had the highest high, and then April 29th had the lowest low. All right, here's a good question here. This is asking between which 2 days did after hours trading appear to have the biggest impact on the difference between the closing price and the following day's opening price. So remember what we said, that even when the market closes, trading can still take place overnight or after the market closes. And so sometimes the price when it closes, it's not going to be the same the next day when it opens. So for after hours trading, what we have to check is, remember, these bars here represent our closing prices. The bars on the right, and then the bars on the left represent the opening prices. And so what we're trying to determine is where's the greatest difference. So where did it jump the most? So from here to here, if you notice, it closed just above 820, and then it opened still just above 820. So what we want to figure out which one had the greatest jump. So as you go from day to day, from the 28th to the 29th, not very big. From the 29th to the 30th, that's a pretty big jump. We're going from 812 to about 823 or so. So this one looks pretty significant. From here to here, not much change, if any. From here to here is pretty significant. We're going from 845 or 846, I guess I should say, to 855, even though that still is not double digits like this one is here. So it looks like it's safe to say that from April 29th to April 30th, so from April 29th to the 30th, that's when there was the biggest impact of after hours trading on this particular stock for Ford. Okay, so we're trying to find the biggest gap from open to close. I'm sorry, close to open, close to open, close to open, close to open. All right, next one here. So now we're asking approximately how many shares a Ford Motor Company were traded over the 5-day period. So big thing to understand is this is talking about how many. So we're worrying about the volume here. This isn't talking about an opening price, a closing price, a high or a low. So we're dealing with the volume down here. So what we've got to determine is how many, because it wants it over the entire 5-day period, how many were traded on each day. So if we look at April 28th, we're right between 150 and 200 million. So we're going to say 175 there. Plus for the 29th, not quite right in the middle. So we're going to approximate at about 70 million. For the 30th, now that's probably closer to the middle, so we can say 75 million on that day. Looks like the first was very even with the 29th, so we'll say 70 million again. And then on the second, we're just under 100,000, so let's say approximated at about 95 million. So what we need to do then is add up all of these prices. Actually, not prices, but shares that were traded. These aren't representing prices. They're talking about the number of shares. And when we add up all of those numbers, we're looking at over a 5-day period, 485 million shares being traded from April 28th to May 2nd. All right. Go ahead and take a second to read this one. Now, for time's sake, I won't write this out, but I'll talk through it. So this is talking about, we want to write a brief financial story of the trading action that occurred for Ford Motor Company on April 28th and the 29th. All right, so we're going to talk about these 2 days and what actually occurred. So we got to make sure we include the volume. So it tells us how to begin our story. It says on April 28th, one share of Ford Motor Company opened at $8.15. During the day, that stock reached a high price of approximately $8.43 and went as low as $8.10. On April 28th, there were approximately 180 million shares that were traded throughout the day, and then it closed at approximately $8.21. Because it opens the next day on April 29th at approximately $8.23, there was clearly some after hours trading that occurred, the opening price to increase from where it closed the night before. throughout the day on April 29th. Again, the stock went as high as $8.37 approximately, but then it dipped as low as $8.08. Apparently trading was not as popular on the 29th as it was on the 28th, and there were only, say, 65, 70 million shares traded that day compared to 175 million the day before. After all was said and done, Ford Motor Company's stock closed on April 29th at approximately $8.12. So that's how you would write that out for a 2-day period. On daily quizzes and on the chapter tests, you'll have to do that through the course of a day, maybe 2 days, but it's important that you understand what you do. You'll always say during the day, or you always start with on this day and talk about how it opened, and you should end with how it closed either on that day or the second day, depending on how many days, whatever the span is that you have to cover. All right. Now we're going to use this information provided for us to construct a 1-day stock bar chart. All right, so let's start. Let's keep it simple. That's probably the best thing to do is start with the low and the high. All right, because that's going to tell us where we want our chart to go. So since we go as low as $39.39, we'll let's set this to be, let's do our units here to be, let's say $40, and then we'll say $40.50. $41, and then $41.50, and that's as high as we'll need to go. All right, so when we draw our low, it goes $39.39. So we're talking about it starting about here, just below the 40 mark, and it's going to go as high as $40.65. So it's not going to quite get to the 41. All right, so there's where our bar would go, just like that. And then we got to make sure that we identify the high, the open and the close. So we'll have a bar here at 40.10 that represents our opening price, and then our closing price, which was $39.79, will be just above the low for the day. So it would look something like that. And this is just a quick rough sketch. And then for our volume, it looks like about 44,500,000 shares were traded that day. So again, let's start here. Let's call this 40 million. Call this 45 million. We'll call this 50 million. So then our volume bar, we're going to take that up. We'll start it down here from 0, and it's going to go just below the 45 million. So that would look something like that. Again, just a rough sketch. All right, so this is what it would look like to construct a 1-day stock bar chart. A better look at that would be here. All right, this is probably a better, a more accurate drawing for that particular information. Notice that more accurate pieces here with the open and the close, the high and the low, and then down here in the bottom is the volume. So you do need to be able to construct a stock bar chart. I won't ask you to do that probably past 1 day, but just to make sure that you understand what each piece, the daily low, the daily high, the open and the close and the volume, how each are represented on the stock bar chart. All right, take a moment and read that question. All right, so if there was no trading for the day, you wouldn't have a high up here, you wouldn't have a low down here, you wouldn't have an opening price, and you wouldn't have a closing bar either. So if you think about it, this high would come down, the low would come up, the open and the close would all kind of be together. So basically what you would have is either a blank space showing nothing, or you might even just have one horizontal line. All right, so that's one of those two options is what you would get, either a blank space or a horizontal line if for some reason trading was suspended for one entire day for a corporation. All right, well, that's the end of the video. Hopefully now, after the past few minutes, past 15 minutes or so, the two things you should be able to do is, one, interpret a stock bar chart, identify the high, the low, the open, and the close, as well as the volume on a particular day or over a particular period of time. And then the second thing you should be able to do is create a stock bar chart for 1 day. And when you do that, remembering that you've got the top part, which represents high, low, open, close, and the bottom half, which talks about the volume. All right, that's the end of this particular lesson. I will see you tomorrow.